Before we get into the pre-episode portion of the episode, you're going to hear me talk about Peyton Jones and an issue that he may have pass blocking. However, what I say stupidly is that he may have an issue run blocking. I apologize. I will do better next time. That's obviously a whiff on my part. Don't let that distract from the quality of the episode, though. Other than that, it's perfect. All right, ladies and gentlemen, before we get to this episode, we have a couple of voicemails we need to check in on, starting with our old friend Jason, who's calling in with his usual score prediction and overall sense of how the Blue Devils are going to go this season. We'll listen to that now.
Hello, hello. How are you doing, Ben, and the gang out there that's listening up? Usual caller here, Jason. I'm a little under the weather, so just trying to get over this end of my last summer cold. But I've listened to all the great podcasts so far. I don't think I've missed any, but I am just calling in to give my score prediction, and I think we're going to pull it out. I think our athletes are a little bit better than theirs, a lot better in other places, but I think I've settled into the score prediction of 42 to 14, 42 to 14. My prediction as far as wins and losses go this year throughout the season, dancing with 7-5, 8-4. If either one of those come up, not including the bowl game win, but 7-5 with a trip to go to the bowl games and finish up 8-4, or 8-4 with a chance to finish up 9-4. That's my vote. That's my prediction, and I can't wait. Been waiting all year. Cash has been waiting all year, so can't wait to see everybody. But as usual, go Duke.
Jason, thanks so much for calling in. I really, really appreciate it. I know it's football season when you start blowing up the voicemail line. I love the enthusiasm. I love the optimism. And it's just great to hear from you guys again. This is just a great time of year, man. I don't know what else to say. It's like we're all getting to see each other again. It's kind of like, well, no one likes it when the summer's over, but the one good thing about the summer ending when you were a kid was you got to see some of your friends you hadn't seen in a while. So I feel like we're doing that here. And speaking of friends that have not seen actually at all, we have a voicemail, I think, from a first-time caller who did a guest pick last year. It is Brian from Duke Blogger. He's got a couple of questions for us, and we're going to listen to his voicemail now.
Yes, this is Brian calling from Duke Blogger. I was curious, being as though the first half Duke seemed to struggle a bit offensively, does that give you guys any pause about them going forward, or do you think it was just first game jitters? Thank you.
Brian, thanks a lot for calling in. I appreciate it, and I enjoy our back and forth and engagement on Twitter. That's a lot of fun. Everybody check Brian out at Duke Blogger. He does a lot specifically with the basketball team. Excellent work. Highly recommend it. To answer your question, the thing that gives me pause and should give every Blue Devil fan pause about what we saw against Elon last night was not some passes being a little bit off by Malik Murphy. That's going to happen. He's a transfer. He's getting used to these guys. We saw a lot of quarterbacks, even Grayson McCall, who's been playing for a long time, be a little bit off in some of his throws early against Western Carolina. So it should not be a surprise that we saw a lot of that, particularly on deep routes, which have lower rates of completion. The stat, though, that we do need to be concerned about, and actually there's two. Our leading rusher was Jaquez Moore, 10 carries for 24 yards against Elon. That's not knocking Jaquez, because if you look at the rest, of the team stats, and also saying less probably is the right idea there, 59 rushing yards, 59 total rushing yards. That's a problem. It's something that we need to be concerned about, and it's something that we need to be worried about. It's hard to win, and it's hard to dominate if you're completely one-dimensional. I will say, though, again, like with Malik Murphy, the O-line is new and it's starting to gel. We lost two key guys in Barton and Monk. Duke is a developmental program. It's harder to replace and plug and play guys at a place like Duke. We all know that. That's not a surprise. And look, you're going to have to throw deep to try to open up. What we saw were some good intermediate route designs. Okay. We saw some really, really good short intermediate routes take off. Eli Pankel had a great game. Samir Hagan's had a great game. We found ways to get it to Harvey, to Robertson. I will say, though, I would like to see a little bit more to maybe jumpstart the running game of Peyton Jones. No knock on Star Thomas, but I think Peyton is going to be really good. And Connor O'Neill has fairly pointed out there may be some run blocking issues that are keeping Peyton further down on the depth chart. We'll see. So, Brian, I know I'm getting a little long-winded here, but I just want to say the run game is the one area that concerned me. And as I said to my good friend Connor O'Neill over on Devils Illustrated when we were discussing the Pro Football Focus grades, as I'm looking at the O-line and I'm looking at the offense and how it gels, I'm keeping the front bottoms line. I got your last three emails, the ones where you said I was sorting some things out in my head because we've got some things to sort out. But that's what happens. It's early in the season. Now, turning away from the Blue Devils, we have one text message that came in about Virginia Tech. That message reads as follows: how comforting is it to know Virginia Tech lost to Vandy at a construction site? Something very lunchbox feel to it. You know, man, I don't know what to say about that other than Gold Star tweet. 100% perfect. Just fantastic. I love the interconference ACC hate of one another. Just Gold Star, clap. Everybody, let's do the standing slow clap. Just fantastic. All right, guys, keep calling in, texting in, 540-632-0160. You'll get on the pod. And with that out of the way, let's turn to the episode as we preview Duke versus Northwestern. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Bull City Coordinators Duke Football Coverage Podcast. Follow us on our website, bullcitycoordinators.com. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts. And check us out on all the socials at Duke FB Coverage. Check out the Classical Antiquity Side Quest at AntiquityPod on Twitter, where we discuss topics, themes, and issues from the time period known as Classical Antiquity. Hey, Duke got a win. 1-0, beat Elon. Offensively, a little bit of a mixed bag, some room for improvement, but the defense looked good. Both are going to have to be clicking as we watch the Blue Devils go up the road on Friday night to Chicago, play the Northwestern Wildcats. And who better to get us ready for that game than the same gentleman who got us ready for this game last year? That's Louie Vaccher, who runs the @Wildcat Report account on Twitter. We all know Louie and are familiar with him. He is the publisher of WildcatReport.com, which is the Northwestern rival site. He's a great guest. We had him on last year, and I'm very glad to have him back this year. And he's going to bring us up to speed on our opponent for week 2 and give us a chance to get to know the Northwestern Wildcats. Louie Vaccher, how are you, sir?
I'm good, Ben. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. We're recording this on Labor Day evening, and I've got Florida State and Boston College on over to the TV on my left. So If you see me looking over there, I'm trying to see if the ACC is going to do better tonight than it did maybe over the weekend, with the exception of Miami. We'll see.
Certainly not Clemson.
You know, people talk about being consistent, and you need to define that term, because Clemson's been a little disappointingly consistent to start the season a couple of times in a row now. And as I was texting with a Clemson friend of mine, you usually think about retention a retention problem as people who leave. But what I reminded
Yeah.
him was sometimes retention problems go both ways and include the people you keep. So, gosh,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's a legit thing now, right? The guys that you recruited that can't play, and you got an opportunity to turn them over or pick up someone else. And if you don't do that, yeah, you can run into problems. Yeah.
yeah. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens and how things develop with the ACC. But the narrative's not going to be good to start, which is always a problem. And
Yeah.
speaking of starting narratives, hey, Duke's got a coach in his first season in Durham. You've got a coach who at Northwestern who's in his second but first, I believe, as the head coach, not interim head coach. Why
Mhm.
don't you bring us up to speed on the Wildcats? Tell us where they are since the last time you were kind enough to come on the podcast.
Yeah, so I mean, last year when we talked, Northwestern was 1-1, and they went down to Durham and got embarrassed. They got beat pretty good down there, and since that moment, I think they've lost one game since then. They're two games since then, but they've been, last year turned out to be a pretty spectacular year. They went 8-5, won the Las Vegas Bowl. They did far better than anyone could have imagined, certainly going into the season after, all the controversy last year with the firing of Pat Fitzgerald and the hazing scandal and the lawsuits and all that kind of stuff, for them to put that all behind them. And David Braun really turned out to be a revelation as a coach. I think they really got lucky with him. He's such a great fit, and the kids are playing hard for him. And last year was much better than expected, and they got off the season with a win this year, playing in a new stadium, a temporary stadium on the lakefront, as you probably saw. So, all in all, I think things are looking up. Things are, people are excited about Northwestern football this year, and we'll see if they can maybe make another bowl game and continue the momentum.
Tell us a little bit about what the construction project is like. I saw a little bit of it on TV as far as where the Wildcats are playing now. Educate us about that situation.
Yeah, I tell you, it was amazing how quickly this came together. I mean, we're talking about they got approval, like they finally got this was sort of like an 11th hour thing. They were trying to piece together a schedule playing at SeatGeek Stadium, which was a soccer stadium on the south side. They were going to try to get some games at Soldier Field. They're going to try to get some games at Wrigley and kind of piece things together. And then someone came up with the idea. It's like, hey, well, what about a temporary stadium? So they brought in the people that build that 16th hole Coliseum, they call it, at the Waste Management Phoenix Open. So they built it. And this thing, I want to say it was March when it got approved. And here they were, they played a game on August 31st. It's amazing how quickly it went up. They got approval from the city, and like the whole university and the fan base, everybody was behind it, and it all came together for them. And to play a game there Saturday where there was nothing, what, 6 months ago, it's pretty incredible what they did, and they pulled it off. And it's a very unique thing. It's a small, it's they had 12,023, I think, was the official attendance, and we were told that was a sellout. So it's a very small venue. It's on, you're really close to the action and all that kind of stuff, and you're right alongside the lake. It's a spectacular view. You got the city to the south, and there were some boats anchored out there in the lake during the game. So it's a very unique thing, and fans were excited about it.
So Northwestern kicked off its season against the Miami Redhawks in what turned out to be a pretty darn close game. Kind of surprised me, and I know that Miami is not a pushover. As somebody who's started following the Ohio Bobcats since my wife got a master's degree from there, I know that Miami's not a bad team, and there's good football to be had in that conference. But walk us through kind of that game. Was that a surprise for you guys to start the season? Is it worrisome at all? What's the lay of the land?
Well, I think it was a mixed bag the way they performed. I thought the defense was outstanding. Offense, they looked like a team in their first game under a new coordinator and a new quarterback, which, and a few new offensive linemen. There were some, they had some hiccups certainly on the offensive side of the ball, but the defense played pretty well. And as far as if it was a surprise, not for me. I mean, they were only like a 3-point favorite. Miami was 11-3 last year. They were the MAC champions. They returned a boatload. They have a sixth-year quarterback, and they have the MAC Defensive Player of the Year. And I think it was 8 returning starters from a defense that was like 8th in the country in scoring. So yes, they were a MAC team, but that was a cream of the crop MAC team. I really thought this was going to be a tight game. I picked Northwestern by 3, so they actually covered the line, believe it or not. And I thought the defense really played well. I mean, and like I said, they got a 6-year quarterback, a lot of experienced veteran players out there, and they shut them down pretty good. And they got 4 sacks and limited them to, I think it was 40 rushing yards. So there was some really positive things on the defensive side of the ball. Offense has got to get better, though. They had a couple fumbled snaps. They fumbled at the goal line going in against Miami and lost the ball. So, they left some points out there, and some things got to get cleaned up. But overall, like I said, it was a mixed bag. I don't think it was a surprise that it was a tough game. I was anticipating that, and I think there were more positives than negatives. I'll say that.
And that MAC is a good conference. You saw Ohio really push Syracuse till I think
Oh,
it
yeah.
was the third quarter till Syracuse got some breathing room. There's talent there. There are some good teams, and so you can't be surprised when you see a game like that.
Oh
Coming
yeah,
in,
and Northwestern has had troubles with Miami was is now after the loss on Saturday, they're 7-4 all time against Northwestern. I mean, that's a team that they've really had trouble with in the past too. It's nothing new for Northwestern to struggle against a MAC team. They usually, that's kind of it's a big game for them to play a Big Ten team. They'd love nothing more than to knock somebody off. And they've done it plenty of times in the past.
so looking at the matchup for this week, the Blue Devils are going on the road. Playing in a small venue should be nothing new to the Blue Devils, so that shouldn't catch us off
Mhm.
guard. But tell us a little bit about maybe what you're looking forward to seeing, what you think the key matchups are going to be for Duke and Northwestern.
Well, I think looking at it, Northwestern's point of view, I think the biggest thing is going to be the offensive line. They're going to get tested. I thought they had a pretty decent game. They didn't get a big push up front or anything like that. They had like 150 yards rushing, but they only allowed like 1 sack. They look pretty solid. They've got some new guys up there. Only one player that's playing the same position he started in last year. So they've done some shuffling up there. They got a new offensive line coach, Bill O'Boyle. So there's been some changes in the scheme. All in all, I thought, they showed some signs, but they're going to really get tested against Duke. Duke has got some dudes up front. They had, I think it was 8 sacks, right, on Saturday.
Let me check that. I know they had about
Yeah.
16 tackles for loss. I'm looking at the team
Yeah, it was a
stats.
ton.
Yeah, I mean they had a bunch of sacks and they got, I mean, the D line was very aggressive and there's some talent there despite the losses, but
Yeah.
it was a heck of a game.
So yeah, I think it's going to be a big test for that offensive line. I think that's going to be a big determining factor in who wins the game, how well they can protect the quarterback and if they can run the ball a little bit. And Mike Wright is a mobile quarterback and he can do some things and he's good at getting the ball out on time and all those things are going to be critical because I think that pass rush is going to be a big challenge for Northwestern's front. Defensively, though, I feel pretty good. I think Northwestern's got a solid defense. They got a lot of veterans players there that have, back that have, started. They played a lot of football in purple, and they're a pretty salty team. They made some plays on Saturday. They looked really good. They look rock solid. We got some injury issues on the defensive line, but overall, I think they're going to be a handful for Duke. I think it's going to be kind of a low scoring game, and I expect it to be a tight game.
That's kind of how I am sensing this game will go. And let me kind of give you the Duke perspective on this, or well, my perspective, not the Duke perspective. But the thing that I'm concerned about coming into this game as a Blue Devil fan is the running game for Duke. It was anemic, is a kind way to put it.
Yeah.
I'll just go ahead and throw that out there. 350 total yards for Duke, 291 of them were in the air, and 59 of them were on the ground. That's just not going to get it done, that imbalance week to week. Jaquez Moore, who's a good running back, 10 carries for 24 yards, led the team. Not going to get it done. Star Thomas averaged 1.8 per clip. That's not going to cut it. Peyton Jones had 3 carries for 15 yards, but a lot of that came late. Well, 15 yards isn't a lot, so maybe saying a lot of it came late isn't really the thing to say. But you get the point. Those yardage, that yardage was in mop-up time. And this is a game, this Northwestern game is one that I was concerned about at the beginning of the season because Duke's O-line, while they've got older guys on it, it's a new O-line as far as all these guys who've transferred in and guys who are coming to fill in for Barton and for Monk. So that could really play into Northwestern's hand there and give the Wildcats a chance to put pressure on Murphy and the receivers to do everything. So that's what I'm worried about. Is there anything from a Northwestern perspective that gives you concern that the Blue Devils can do either offensively or defensively?
Like I said, I think Duke, you bring that up, that was another point I was going to make. I think Northwestern will have the edge defensive line. They're pretty deep at defensive line, and even though they've got a couple guys dinged up that probably won't be able to play, they're still pretty deep, and they've got a lot of experience up front. And I think they may be able to exploit some things with Duke's offensive line, and that's certainly what they're going to do. They're going to try to do is take away that running game, make them one-dimensional, and then try to put some pressure on the quarterback. That will be their game plan. I think, like I said, I think the bigger concern for Northwestern is can their offense consistently move the ball, move the change, stay in sequence, get good downs and distances and things like that, and execute the game plan. They're going to have to be sharper than they were on Saturday, when they, like I said, they had some fumbles that you hope, they had some hiccups that you hope are because it was the first game, and you hope to see some progression from week 1 to week 2, because they're going to have to be better to get a win on Saturday.
And looking at things as far as Northwestern offensively, Mike Wright, the quarterback, was everything for you guys. But 18 to 30 for 178 yards is probably not something you're overly confident about. But 9 carries for 65 yards and a touchdown is something that you're going to be confident about. Duke's secondary is still a little bit of a work in progress, but the D-line and the linebackers showed up. What is going to be the biggest challenge for Duke in dealing with Mike Wright?
Yeah, Wright is, he's a guy, he's really impressive running the ball. I'll tell you, that guy, he's fast and he makes good decisions out there. He was 18 of 30. And a lot of them, like I was saying, there were some miscommunications where he's throwing down the Bryce Kurtz, and Kurtz, cut off the route and did an out, and the ball sailed long. There were some things like that where they were a little bit out of sync, you saw. And I mentioned he fumbled the ball twice. They lost 2 fumbles, which is one more than they lost all of last season. So there are some things he's got to clean up, and he was inconsistent. But I remember in the third quarter, he made a couple plays. Their first drive, it was their only touchdown drive of the game, where he had one where he was under some pressure, and he got outside the pocket, and he was out there, looked like a run, and he waited and waited until the defender came up, and then he just dinked it over his head to the tight end, and it turned into a 33-yard play. And in the next play, he ran it in for a touchdown from 13 yards. So he really showed flashes there what kind of quarterback he can be. I think that's in terms of Northwestern fans and the coaches, you saw that. You can see the potential there. That's the kind of player he can be, that can be pretty dynamic, make plays off platform when he's outside the pocket and things like that. And he did a pretty good job keeping his eyes downfield. So he's a guy that can make plays. He's just got to be more consistent, and that's going to, come with reps. He's learning a new system too. He just got here in June. He's a grad transfer. He's played with, I think this is his fourth different offense that he's played in his career, at three different schools. So, it's going to take some time for him to get up to speed, and how quickly he can do it will be a big factor in how successful their season is.
It's interesting what you said about the timing being a little off. Malik Murphy, of course, came into Duke from Texas, and I think it was David Hale tweeted that Murphy was maybe 6 inches away from throwing for 1,100 yards against Elon, because there were just some passes that either went low or went long or went high, and the timing was a little off, which is one of the challenges that bringing in transfers, so many of them, presents in this era of football. And speaking of which, Boston College is up 7-0, and Florida State is now punting with 13:20-ish to go in the second quarter. Speaking of, yeah, I wrote an article for the College Huddle about how the ACC disappointed in week one, and I thought about waiting till Tuesday so I could throw in what happens in this game. But man, it could be a long season in Tallahassee, which all of us who are part of the ACC just hate to see this occurring. But enough about that.
Is firemikenorvell.com up yet? Is that
I think it's sharing a web space with firebillynapier.org.
That's right. Yeah.
So the bringing in transfers, I think the point that I was going to make is it takes a little longer to get a sense of maybe where your team is going to be in this new era of college football than maybe it did in the past. And is that kind of where you are with Northwestern? You need to see a couple of games before you can have a real sense of where the team is going to go, or are you fairly confident about the Wildcats' chances?
I mean, I feel pretty decent about their chances on Saturday, but we don't really know what the team is yet, right? So like I said, I think the defense is. I'm confident in the defense. I think anybody will tell you that Northwestern's defense should be pretty good. They were good last year. They got a lot of guys back. There's a lot of veterans out there. Graduates and seniors that have played a lot of football. I think they're going to be good up front. The offense, that's a work in progress, and we'll have to see. And, most of the time you find out a lot more about a team, like how much they should be a big improvement between week one and week two. So we'll have to see what they look like on Saturday. And then we've got maybe a barometer. We don't know how good Miami of Ohio is. You don't really know good how Northwestern is, or Duke. And I think we'll find out a lot more on Saturday. It's a step up in class. It's a Power 5 opponent. They've got some players. They've lost 5 in a row to Duke. I mean, they've got a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. I think they'd love to end that losing streak. So, and Duke, like, we know they got a new coach too, new coaching staff, new systems over there. So they're working through some kinks too.
You mentioned that 5 straight. That is hard for me to believe, but that is true. I pulled it up on Winspedia. Wow. Yeah. Let's see. 2017, 2018, and then 2021, 2022, and of course last year. Okay.
And they've drummed them pretty good a couple times in there too. I remember that 41-14. It's Duke has really had their number the last, last 5 times over 8 years or whatever it is. And that's through, Cutcliffe and Elko, and it's been 5 in a row. I know before that, I think Northwestern had won 8 of 9, but Duke has owned this. And I know it, Northwestern likes in the non-conference, they like to play, they'll play like a MAC team. They'll play a FCS opponent, and then they'll do a quote unquote academic school, right? So they like to match up with a Duke, or in the past they've had Vanderbilt or Boston College or whatever they are. And, Duke has owned this series, and I think it really sticks them. And now too on recruiting, I don't know how close you follow recruiting, but I think it's 5 guys this year had Northwestern and Duke in the finalists, and they picked Duke, and that's what happens when you lose all those games. And you know, obviously Manny Diaz is a heck of a recruiter too, and I think he's gonna raise up the recruiting a little bit. But you know, that's stuff players see that, you know, and they see Duke beating them every year. So I think Northwestern would like nothing more than to end that losing streak on Friday night.
Well, it's interesting. I've gone back and looked at the win streaks, and you're right. And obviously there were years this wasn't played, but from '96 until 2017, Duke only won twice, once under Ted Roof and once under Fred Goldsmith, and then since then 2017 to the present, it's been all Duke, albeit in some close games in a couple of those instances. So
Mhm.
it's changed a fair amount from what I remember when I was in high school, because those were not good times for the Blue Devils. They were rough.
Yeah, it's been tough. Though I will say this, like that game hasn't meant like I remember in 2017. I'm looking at the games now. 2017, that was the one I was referring to. Duke beat Northwestern 41-17. I remember they really got embarrassed down there, and they ended up winning 10. Northwestern ended up winning 10 games that year. The following year, 2018, Duke drubbed them 21-7, and Northwestern ended up winning the Big Ten West and playing for the Big Ten championship. So it's not like it has any drastic repercussions or anything like that. But you know, it's been since 2016 that they've beaten Duke. That's a long time. So I think you know, they'd like to end it on Friday night for sure.
I think that the interesting part, this is not groundbreaking, so I apologize for that. But really, whichever defensive unit can create the most turnovers, I think is going to cause their team to win. And the reason I say that is the way you've talked about Northwestern's defense sounds a lot like the Blue Devils defense that we saw against Elon. We saw all the tackles for loss, the 8 sacks. I think it was 16 or so tackles for loss. The the defensive line and the entire defensive unit held Elon to 30 rushing yards and 2.3 yards per play. Now, you know, you can talk about, you know, talent and skill differentials and all that, and Elon and the MAC. And I don't know enough about each team to compare them, but Miami has had a good program and certainly did last year. But Northwestern's defense was not too shabby. So, I mean, I just think one of those units is going to have to step up and be the difference maker. Is that kind of how you come down on this one?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And like I said, I've got a lot of confidence with Northwestern's defense. And you're absolutely right about turnovers. You know, Northwestern in 2022, right, when they went 1-11, I want to say they were minus 13 in turnover margin. Just absolutely killed them. Last year they were plus 18. And they ended up 8-5, right? That's a 31 turnover swing. I mean, that's huge. I think they were third in turnover margin last year in the country. So that tells the story right there. If you know that, I think most games come down to that anyway, but certainly I think this is going to be pretty low scoring. I think it's going to be a tight game. So it's who makes the fewest mistakes or who can generate the most takeaways. They're probably going to win the game. Yeah.
And I remember that when Elko came to town in 2022, the turnover margin was, I think, plus 14 for the Blue Devils, and you saw a lot of those wins happen.
Yeah.
And so Diaz, as we know, always has a very aggressive, very get after it defense, very much put pressure on the other team. And we saw that, of course, at Penn State, and we saw it, small sample size, but last night. I'm going to expect that that's going to be a theme that we see during Coach Diaz's time in Durham. So we've talked a little bit about what all you've seen from Northwestern, what you expect from Northwestern. Offensively from Duke, I think we're going to see a lot of passing the ball, a lot of tempo. But unless Duke can turn up that run, I think it's going to stay, that running game, I think it's going to stay really close. And of course, Duke has some good receivers. You've got Jordan Moore, you've got Eli Pankel, Samir Hagans, Harvey, Robertson. Hasley and Dalmolin at tight end. It'll be interesting to see how they can make use of all those players as Boston College just scores another touchdown, I think, on a wheel route
Boy.
to take a lead of 13-0 on the road at Florida State. My law partner, as we all know, is a Florida State alum. I did not say anything to him about this game, but I was thinking this is going to be a tougher one maybe than he would like, just because O'Brien, say what you want about him, but he's a good coach.
Yeah, they're going to hear some boos soon.
I'm glad I got the TV muted right now. It's just not good. But I think to go back to the Blue Devils, there's enough offensive weapons that will keep, even with maybe a subpar running game as the line gets its sea legs under it, keep them in the game. But let's turn to the predictions. Why don't you tell us who you think is going to win and why?
Well, I'm going to pick Northwestern. I just think, number one, like I said, it's time, right? The pendulum's got to start swinging the other way a little bit. But I think I expect a little bit more out of the offense. I think, they had those two, fumbled snaps, and they had a couple, they tried to do some jet sweeps that were all out of sync. There was just a lot of things we saw that I got to say that's up. You hopefully can look at that and say that's first game jitters a little bit. I think I think a lot of it's going to come down to that offensive line. Can they protect right? Can they move get a little bit of a push on the line of scrimmage, get the running game going a little bit and move the chains, build some time of possession and things like that. I think they can win the game. I think their defense is going to win it, but they've got to make enough plays offensively to take advantage of certain things. Like you said, if they can get a couple takeaways and get some scores, I think that can change the game. I expect it to be low scoring again, and I'm going to pick Northwestern. I think, for the defense, and just because they're kind of due. The losing streak has to end sometime.
Yeah, unlike my Classical Antiquity Side Quest side project podcast, football is not a something without end, which of course is a reference to the Aeneid, and which Rome was an empire without end. We just dropped an episode about the Aeneid today, which I would encourage everybody to listen to. Yeah, it's actually the professor who came on, Dr. Helen Lovett, talked about the role that trauma plays in the poem. And it was a fascinating discussion. And
what's the name of the podcast?
The Classical Antiquity Side Quest. If you go to bullcitycoordinators.com, you'll find the links there for everything, and you can just go to our YouTube channel. But she was a great guest, and I'm stalling because I'm having a hard time picking this game, and let me explain why. So in the off season, this is one that I circled on my calendar as one to be concerned about. Okay, for the Blue Devils. And watching the game against Elon, I felt like the defense had settled in, but that the offense wasn't clicking. I'm not sure if going on the road is the cure for that. So my head is telling me Northwestern wins this one by like a field goal. But my heart is saying I don't want to pick against the Blue Devils. So I'll just put it this way. This is one I'm having a hard time picking, and I'm just going to say I could see it going either way and not being a surprise to me. I don't feel good enough to pick it as of Monday night.
I was going to say it's only Monday, Ben. You got some time.
Right. Well, I try to turn these around in 24 hours. I just Louie, I just think that this one is a tough one, because these teams are so similar, and a long streak against one opponent is always a recipe for trouble. Mm-hmm. And I don't think, though, that if either team loses to the other, this would be a bad loss. I think these teams are probably somewhat similarly matched. Am I crazy?
No, I agree with that 100%. It's I don't know. I haven't looked at the betting line or anything like that, but it's going to be. I think the gamblers will think it should be a close game. I think it will be, and I don't think there will be any shame in losing this game either way. And, to add to you're talking about the factors into the game too. It's also a Friday night game, which is going to be, it knocks your week off a little bit. Duke's got to come in early. It's, that's something that's going to be out of their routine a little bit too. So that's going to be strange. It's kind of a weird setup too. So all those things, I don't know. I just got a hunch that Northwestern is going to end the streak. But if it goes the other way, I wouldn't be surprised. And I agree with you. I think it's going to be a field goal, and it's going to come down to who makes the fewest mistakes or who can make a big play somewhere down, in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and the good thing for Duke though is you have a situation where you played on a Friday night already, so at least you're staying on a week.
No, that's true. Yeah.
That's helpful, but the negative, of course, is you're going on the road, right?
Yeah.
So this one is it's just a tough one because you go back to the year Elko's first year. It was an 8-point game, and Duke almost gave it away at the last minute to Northwestern, and Northwestern ended up 1-10 that year or something. I mean,
1-11, 2022.
Yeah, that's right. I still haven't mentally adjusted to the 12 games, I guess. I don't know what's wrong with me, but this one I just see it's a tough one, and maybe it's going to be one of those things. Whoever has the ball last is going to be the team that scores. So that goes back to the turnover differential. If you can steal one or the other, maybe that can happen. But and we'll see. We'll see how that plays itself out. Before I let you go, is there anything that you could tell us about Chris Collins, former Blue Devil, and what he is doing with the Wildcats men's basketball team?
Yeah, Chris Collins, they locked him up to an extension. I think it was before or after the 2023 season when they got back to the tournament. But, Northwestern just made their second NCAA tournament, second in a row for the first time in school history. It's only their third trip. Chris Collins is the only guy to ever bring them there. Right now, people, a lot of confidence in Chris Collins and the program. They just got back they were in Greece and Italy. They did the European tour over the summer. So, this year I think it's all about they lost Boo Buie, one of maybe arguably the greatest player they had in program history. So they're going to have to, rebound without him. So we'll see how well they can adjust to that. But they've got some players. Chris Collins has things rolling right now. It's really his program. And it's funny. He was always kind of like the second fiddle to Pat Fitzgerald, and now Pat Fitzgerald's gone, and Chris Collins is the guy now. And right now, the basketball program has never been stronger than it is now. They're playing in a nice new arena, that came online in 2018, and they are things are looking up for Northwestern basketball. And Chris Collins, he's a Chicago guy. I think a lot of people thought once he had some success that he was going to move on. But, he grew up around here. I think he feels like this is home, and he's got a good situation there that, the pressure to win isn't huge at Northwestern. He lives in a really nice house on the North Shore of Chicago. It's a nice place and nice area to live. And I think he's got it good right now. I think, Northwestern basketball has never been better than it is right now.
And I'm not sure why you would leave a good place like Northwestern. And I don't want to make it sound like, well, the expectations are low and you can benefit from it. But I think he's in a really good position at Northwestern. The school supports him, and they clearly are going to believe in what he wants to do. And he's not in a spot where he necessarily has to be constantly afraid of one bad year, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I don't know why you would give that up, unless the only thing I guess I could see Chris ever leaving for, but I don't think that's going to happen. I'm not advocating for it, which is not a knock on Chris. I think he's a tremendous coach. I mean, I think he's done a heck of a job. I think the only job he would probably consider leaving for would be to come home to Durham. But John Shire, if he keeps up what he's been doing these first 2 years, nobody's going to be advocating to let John go, and nor should they. I think he's done a tremendous job. But I think you guys are really fortunate to have Chris, because I just think he's a tremendous X's and O's basketball coach and really knows how to get the most out of the team. And it's just fun to watch him do well and succeed.
Yeah. And I will say this too. Like 3 years ago, I thought going into the 2022-23 season, right? So they made the tournament, and then he had 5 straight losing seasons, and they had some ugly years in there, and it really like things, the wheels had come off, and I really thought they lost Pete Nance to the portal, and I really thought they were gonna, have another losing season. He was gonna get fired. And then they made the tournament, they turned it to Boo Booey, they kind of gave him the keys, and they played a guard centric system, which turned out to be fantastic. Because they had Bowie and Chase Audige, and they made the tournament. Then they did it again last year, and what amazing swing these last few years. So, and you're right. I think Northwestern feels thankful to have him, and they will they would love to have him as long as he continues. I think, to follow up on you, I don't know if it's Duke. I think the NBA could be his aspiration for him one day, possibly, but I don't know that. I don't know if he's an NBA guy, but his dad coached there, and we'll see. I think that could be something down the line.
That'd be interesting, because I just remember his dad always had a short shelf life wherever he
Oh yeah,
coached. Doug
sure.
never lasted long. It started great, and then it would flame out, which is not. I'm trying not to be critical of Doug or anything. I'm just saying that.
Oh no,
I
he's a high strung guy. Yeah, he
Yeah, I
is.
just wonder how much it would be in Chris's mind, just thinking about how his dad didn't last very long at a lot of stops, and how that might play out. I don't know, but
Yeah.
the money's the money, right?
That's right. Yeah. And maybe one day he looks at it as a challenge and that he wants to, coach at the highest level. That could be. We'll see. But for now, I think he's pretty happy where he's at.
Well, Louie, I appreciate you coming on. As you know from being on last year, I give everybody an open mic and a chance to say whatever they want to say here. And if you want to comment on BC driving with the ball again against the Seminoles, boy, that would come in real handy right now. It'd be really timely.
It's a good day not to be a Florida State fan, I guess. That's
Oof.
that's gonna be bad. Oh boy. Yeah, Mike Norvell is that's gonna be a rough week if they lose this one.
Hmm.
Man. But no, the wildcatreport.com is my site. I've been running it for 20 years now, so it's been a long time. This is, it's not my full-time job. This is my hobby, my side hustle, as the kids call it today, but my labor of love. So that's where I am, and on Twitter I'm at Wildcat Report, and really looking forward to the game on Friday night.
Before we end this episode, we are going to check in on Richlandia. However, Dad had some issues calling in. Part of his message got cut off, and he has knee surgery on September 4th. So we couldn't really fit in a time for him to give a full analysis of the Wildcats. He did text me his score prediction, which is the Blue Devils 27 and Northwestern 13. I love it. Go Duke. Dad, hope the surgery goes well. And I know Mom will keep us all updated throughout the day on how you're doing and how you recover. And now with that, let's get back to the episode. Well, Louie, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I enjoy these discussions we have. Last year was great. This year was fantastic. And hopefully you and I will be able to continue doing these throughout the season. Really looking forward to our continued discussion and hopefully continued Blue Devil domination of Northwestern. Sorry, but that's who I got to root for. Go Duke as always. Hope the Blue Devils win, but we'll see what happens. And everybody, thank you so much for listening. Check us out on our website, bullcitycoordinators.com. You can find us on all the socials at Duke FB Coverage. Check out the Classical Antiquity Side Quest. Go to Antiquity Pod on Twitter. Sometimes Duke has a bye week. They got 2 of them this year. It's a good time to learn about things like the Aeneid, the Cult of Mithras. Listen to some movie reviews. Augustus, Alexander the Great. We're hitting everything. We're going to have we're going to have more episodes. We're going to keep them coming about once a month. So please tune in and check it out. The Classical Antiquity Side Quest. Go to the YouTube channel for Bull City Coordinators. You'll find it. And surprise announcement. So the game on Fridays at 9 p.m. And to paraphrase Lethal Weapon, I'm getting too old for that. You know what? So what does that mean? That means that co-coordinator Tim and I are going to record the game Friday night. We're going to watch it Saturday afternoon. I'm going to be in an internet blackout. Okay. Nobody text me. Nobody call me. Nobody reach out. Nobody email me, check on me, see how I'm doing. I'm going to watch the game on Saturday. Okay. I don't want any of you all hitting me up or wondering where I am. Okay. And why I'm not tweeting. It's 9 o'clock. I'm not staying up till midnight or after. I'm too old. I'm too sad. I'm a broken down old man. It's just not going to happen. Okay. We're going to watch the game on Saturday. Probably will drive us crazy to some extent, but that's what we're going to do. So you will get my live thread Twitter analysis on Saturday. I promise. Okay. So stay tuned for that. And I hope you all will enjoy it. And I appreciate you all so much for listening. Most important, as always, go Duke.